2.2 Converting fractions and decimals. I can convert between fractions and decimals. So before we get started, let's looking at what rational numbers are. It's something we're going to talk about this entire unit. So I want you to write the word rational numbers over here. The first kind of numbers you learned when you were growing up were called counting numbers, or known as natural numbers. Just your positives 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Then along came what are called whole numbers. It includes the 0 and then all of those positive numbers. Then along came the integers, which included the negatives, the positives, and 0. And then there's rational numbers. Those are your decimals and fractions, but only decimals and fractions that do something called terminating and repeating. So this is what we're going to take a look at today, are these rational numbers that can be turned between decimals and fractions. So I want you to write decimal to fraction and a fraction to a decimal. We're going to come back to that picture in a minute. So let's look at a decimal to a fraction. When you go from a decimal to a fraction, you say it and simplify it. What I mean by saying it is what's its place value? What's the correct way to say 0.15? The correct way to say it is 15 hundredths. So there you go. You wrote it as a fraction. Now we just need to simplify. So if we simplify both by 5, we would get 3/20. So 0.15, or said correctly 15 hundredths, is actually the fraction 3/20. So let's do another one. 0.2, or 2/10. Simplified down, both of them can be divided by 2, would be 1/5. Go ahead and stop the video now and try the next one. All right, let's take a look. It has a whole number on the front, so we just say 2 and 345 thousandths. So what can go into something that ends in a 5 and a 0 is 5. Yes, you may use a calculator, and you would get 2 and 69 200ths. The last one, 0.008. Well, that's 8 1,000ths. Well, 2 can go into there, and I'd get 4 over 500, but 2 could go in again, so I would get 2 over 250. Oh my goodness, but 2 could go in again, so I'd get 1 over 125. All of those are equivalent fractions for 8 thousandths. So let's go back to our picture here. Follow this arrow. When I go from a decimal to a fraction, I'm going to say it and then simplify it. All right, so now let's look at how do I go from my fraction to a decimal. Let's go backwards. So from a fraction to a decimal, I need to get the denominator to be 10, 100, or 1,000. So we need to use our idea of equivalent fractions here. So how did I go from 5 to 10? Well, I times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, and I would get 3/10. Well, 3/10 is written as 0.3. Go ahead and try the other two. Okay, so I can't go to 10, but I could go to 100 here. So from 25 to 100, I times 4. So 6 times 4 is 24. So my answer is 24 hundredths, 0.24. The last one also went to 100, but I times by 25 times. So this would be 75, or 75 hundredths. But what happens if my denominators don't go to 10, 100, or 1,000? So we have to look at another way, and that would be to divide. The fraction bar right here is actually a division sign. So what I type in my calculator is 3, the divide sign, and 4. But I'm actually saying how many 4s go into 3 because this number should be less than 1. If you get a number bigger than 1, you put your numbers in backwards. So if I do that on my calculator, I get 0.75. So go ahead and type in 2/3. You get something that looks like this, 0.6666666, and then 7. This 7 at the end is actually rounded. It's called truncating. It's because a calculator can't go on forever, so they're telling you the next number would have rounded up. So in this case, I would write this actually as 0.6, and this bar is called a repeating bar. So we put that over the top because that tells us 6 is repeating. How about if I type in 1/6? Remember, you type in 1, the divide sign, and 6. You will notice you get 0.166. So almost the same thing. Again, it's rounding at the end, but actually the only thing repeated is the 6. So when you put your repeating bar, you have to make sure it only goes over the 6. So let's go back to our little picture here. We have two things we could do. The easier of the two would just be to divide. So let's write that first using a calculator. Or you can get the denominator to be 10, 100, or 1,000. I want to just quickly look at the difference between a terminating and repeating decimal. These are rational numbers because they terminate and repeat. When we just typed in 3 divided by 4, we got 0.75. Go ahead and type in 3 divided by 8. You will get, and sometimes I write the 0, sometimes I don't. It doesn't matter. It's the same either way. 375 thousandths. They stop. Terminating means the decimal stops or ends. Maybe a quicker definition is just writing it ends. The decimal ends. Well, with repeating, we noticed in this one we got the 0.6 repeating. Go ahead and type in 2/6. You will notice you get 0.3333 and so on and so forth. And the last number doesn't go up to a 4 because the next number would be 3 and it would stay the same, but it still is 0.3 repeating. So go try 1/11. On this one, you get 0.090909. So what's repeating? And the last number is a 1. Again, it's rounded. So it's 0.09. And the repeating bar has to go over the 0 and the 9. If you put the other 0 out here, that's fine, but make sure your repeating bar doesn't go over that. You can go ahead and get started with your assignment. Oh, no, forgot. I want you to memorize a few things. These are the easiest fractions to look at. You can use a calculator, but at this point we should know 1/2 is 0.5. 1/3 is that 0.3 repeating. 2/3 would be 0.6 repeating. 1/4 is a fourth of a dollar is 0.25. This would simplify to a half a dollar, so that's 0.5, same as up here. And 3/4 would be 75 cents or 0.75. The fifths of a fraction, you basically double them to get 10. So think about that. If I double the bottom, I have to double the top, so this would be 0.2. 2/5 would be 0.4. 3/5 would be 0.6. 4/5 would be 0.8. The numerators are just doubled. The ninths are interesting because they're repeating. And basically, if you go ahead and type it in, try typing in 1/9. You will get 0.1 repeating. 2/9, you will get 0.2 repeating. So what you should notice is whatever the numerator is, it's just repeating. So this would be 0.5 repeating. 6/9 would be 0.6 repeating. 7/9, 0.7 repeating. 8/9, so you just have to remember when in the 9s on the bottom, the 8 on top is just a repeating. All right, now you can go get started on your homework.